the big idea here is you've got limited time and you got to spend it well. And the world will take your time if you let it take your time. And you have to fight back and instead deploy your time intentionally on the things that matter to you.
What is up, everyone? We have another great show of Business is Human. Sadly, Andrei is no longer my neighbor in Austin. But Andrei, where are you hanging out these days, man?
I'm actually in Colorado Springs, working out of Colorado College, spending some time with my sister. Happy to be here. It's a beautiful day out.
Brother of the year right there. And today we have a guest that I'm excited to talk to, Rob Gonzalez, the co-founder and chief marketing officer of Salsify. Rob, what's going on, man?
Hey, not much. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And man, if I would have known that you would have been in Naples, I would have made the trip down. We could have done it in person or something, maybe, or across the room, or however people do that kind of stuff. But what a small world. My folks have a place down there, so spent a lot of time down there.
It's a great area. And, you know, it's funny, this whole podcasting thing, we kicked ours off about 4 months before COVID hit. And we only ever had about 3 of our guests in person. And they were so much better. So it's been most of my podcasting experience has been this Zoom after Zoom after Zoom world that we've been living in. And man, I can't wait to do them in person again.
Yeah, the thing that's awesome about the in-person is first off, I don't know how many people are on your show, but me and Andrei are kind of always trying to figure out, like, when do you jump in the conversation? It's kind of just hard to have those social cues that you would get in person. I also think it's just amazing. Even though Zoom is great, there is just like a different vibe and feeling when you go in, you meet someone, you're sitting next to them. It's just a level of intimacy that I think is as great as Zoom is, hard to replicate.
Totally agree.
One of the things I know that you think a lot about that I think our listeners are interested in, and I know we are, is this concept of giving people the time so that they can do great work. And boy, I got to tell you, I have tried so many different systems, hacks, rules for myself, calendar blocks, whatever, to try to just make this a reality. And it is just constantly a struggle. So I'm interested in, how did this become a topic that you're passionate about? And then would love to hear how you've really kind of started to have this work for you in your business.
I love this topic. I love building things. Let's start there. I am somebody who just likes building things. And that could be writing code, writing a program, building a website, writing a strategy document. Like, I am happiest when I'm sitting down and creating something. And creating things is really, really hard to do unless you've got huge blocks of time. I don't know how much writing you do, but if you sit down and you try to write anything of any complexity, for me, it feels like the first 45 minutes is almost just getting myself into any kind of flow that I can start writing in. It's painful. And then I hit a stride where I can start banging out really, really good work. It's like that for creating presentations. It's like that for writing. And so my experience in life is that if you're creating something and you're doing something hard, you need big blocks of time to do it. So these meeting days, and I experienced a lot after starting Salsify, these meeting days where you got a meeting for half an hour, then you got a half an hour free, then you got a meeting, then you got a half an hour free, then you got a meeting, then you got another meeting, then you get a half hour free, or however they break down like that. Those breaks between meetings, you can't accomplish anything material. You can answer email, but we're not here on this earth to answer email. That's not the value you bring to the world, is having inbox zero and being good at email. That's not a thing. So these half hour blocks I found to be brutal. And for myself, when we were a smaller business, I would start blocking out longer periods of time. And a lot of senior executives that are effective do this. Peter Drucker talks about this. The whole first chapter of The Effective Executive is manage your time, right? And they would block whole days. And so I met over time people that as a practice would block their Fridays or block their Wednesdays or block 2 mornings a week. And so I started doing this and blocking huge sections of a day or even full days here and there where I could sit down and do the hard things that just take a lot of time and concentration. Now, as we got bigger, what would happen was that people would just start scheduling over my work blocks. And, I would try to schedule maybe early Tuesday morning as a work block, but then, Peter would schedule Tuesday afternoon as a work block. So, whose work block gets violated if we're going to meet with each other. And we've got 450 employees right now. And so the kind of interleaving of people's schedules made it increasingly difficult for me to protect my own work. And then I also sort of had this realization that as a founder, people are more likely to respect my time than they are to respect, another one of their employees' times. There's a little factor there, right? And so a couple of years ago, I had this epiphany that, well, first of all, if we're going to be successful, we need to do hard work. The only way to do hard work is to have huge blocks of time. And from my experience, the only way to have huge blocks of time is if we've all got the same blocks of time together and where it's treated as a serious thing from the senior executive level. So in my department, I started blocking off 2 5-hour blocks over the course of the week. Whether it's an 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. or a noon to 5. And I would call them focus times. And those were times that I told the rest of the company, look, you can't block over our focus times. And internal to my department, we don't block over our focus times. And so now we've actually, as a company, the company adopted Focus Fridays, where we have all Fridays are meeting free. And then in addition, marketing has 2 half days a week that are still blocked as focus time. So we've got, if you think about it, it's still not that much of the week. It's 2/5 of the week is blocked to do work. And the rest of the time, a lot of people are stuck in meetings. I wish it were more than that. But I think it's a lot more than a lot of people typically experience in knowledge work.
No question. I mean, that's amazing. I'm almost like, wow, like every week's a hack day. You have like a hack day almost. Just in terms of, it's so rare that I feel like it's not, especially for people that are managing people or customer facing. It's so hard. And I think one of the really great things that you did there is that you made it a uniform policy for your whole department. Because, dude, I have the same thing where I throw these blocks up on my thing, and then my co-founders throwing things in my calendar, and then, oh, so-and-so wants you to jump on this like customer fire call. And unless everybody's doing it, it just does not stick.
And I'll say it requires a lot of maintenance to get it to stick too, because you're growing, you're hiring more people, new people come in and they've got their old habits. What is this focus time thing? And unless I personally beat back attempts to violate the focus time, even within my own department, it doesn't stick. It requires constant vigilance. I also have written what I call meeting rantifestos on how much I hate meetings. In particular, recurring meetings. I think recurring meetings are the devil. Don't do them. They just basically fill up your whole calendar, and a lot of them are just useless. And so it just requires a lot of investment. It requires a lot of defending of the time. It requires having people just be okay with not meeting and instead doing something asynchronously in a document with comments. It requires trying to teach people that, hey, look, you can just call them for 5 minutes. Just pick up your phone, call them, have them pick up, talk about it for 5 minutes. You don't have to schedule a meeting to do it. It requires a lot of change of habits and practice. And we're not perfect, but I think just prioritizing it and treating it seriously goes a long way to keeping it real.
First off, I guess real quick, just give the 30-second elevator on Salsify.
Yeah, Salsify is a software platform that empowers brand manufacturers to win on the digital shelf. We work with a lot of iconic companies that the Coca-Colas and Johnson & Johnsons and Levi's and L'Oreal's and Bosch's and whatnot of the world. And the world that they sell into in 2021, I mean, we're in COVID now, so it's even more so now than before, but the world that they sell into is primarily digitally driven. You are, as a shopper, you're shopping on Amazon, you're shopping on Home Depot, you're shopping on Wayfair, you're shopping on eBay, you're shopping on Google, doing your research, you're discovering products on Instagram. And so these brands have to be multi-channel marketers digitally. They have to make sure that every touch point on the digital buyer's journey is optimized. They have to make sure that the brand looks good and is consistent everywhere you find them on the internet. And so our software platform helps them do that. It helps them get all their content in one place, optimize it for each buying touch point, and improve over time. So
that context is helpful. So you're the chief marketing officer. You presumably have a pretty big team. There's 450 people. And I always think about kind of the role of executives being, hiring great people, getting the most out of those people. That's so much time for you to do deep work. What are the things that you primarily spend that time on, those 2.5 days that are not in meetings, coaching, doing hiring meetings, et cetera?
It really varies week to week. Part of the startup thing is that there's not really a lot of consistency over long periods of time. So there'll be periods, for example, where for whatever reason, I get chunked up with a bunch of customer presentations. And I'll be meeting with senior executives for a Fortune 500 company over in Europe. And I don't know that much about the European e-commerce ecosystem off the top of my head. And so I've got to bone up on that. So that happened a few months ago. And so leading up to that, I had to do a lot of research into how do these things work in Europe, and what are customers that are using us over there, and what are stories that they have about the challenges of the landscape that are over there, and how do I take what we're doing and make it relatable in stories and anecdotes as opposed to just feeds and speeds. And so a lot of it'll be research, a lot of it'll be drafting, a lot of it'll be presentation, practice, and prep, a lot of things like that. And so in those situations, that eats up a lot of time. We had company kickoff just in mid-January, and company kickoff requires presentation, but it also requires a lot of internal comms and coordination. So a lot of writing and work goes into that. We're right now expanding into a couple new markets. That requires market strategy. It requires coming up with who your ideal customer profile is, why they care about you, what customers do you have that represent that already that you can talk to. And so there's a lot of this. From a marketing perspective, there's a lot of scripting and drafting and brainstorming and testing that goes on in any of those things, which requires, in my experience, just a significant amount of time to get right. And then internally, there's also career pathing and organization design. You said it yourself, like a big part of my role at this point is building team and developing team. That requires time. You can't just go from one-on-one to one-on-one to one-on-one to one-on-one to one-on-one and do a good job of that. You've got to carve out time where you say, okay, those last 6 conversations I had with so-and-so, here are my notes from those conversations. They want to have a career path discussion. What are the possible career paths that are open to them what do I think they'd be good at based on their strengths? What work have I done that I admire? Have they done that I admire? What work have they done that's maybe not so strong? And putting that together in a way that's thoughtful, you can't just do that. That requires time. So I think a lot of managers discount the amount of space and thought you need to even do that part of the job.
No, 100%, man. I mean, it's like, I feel this all the time with sales managers. Just that's who we sell to often and interact with. And a lot of them just kind of like show up and throw up to their like one-on-one meetings. There's no 15 to 30 minute inspection of like an analysis of what has this person actually been doing over the past 7 days, and what can we do to improve them, and what did we talk about last time, and how do I verify whether that's something that's actually been worked on or not. And so I do think there is kind of a lost art of preparation for those one-on-one meetings. I've kind of seen it go both ways, where a lot of managers or a lot of individuals leaders say, okay, this is your time for me. Like, come to me with like what you need help with. What do you need? And I think that's kind of a cop out. I mean, I really do think I just think the manager preparation time for those meetings is something that does not get enough consideration or done as consistently as it should be. Yeah.
I read the Ben Horowitz point of view on structuring one-on-ones, which I actually ascribe to and I really like. The one-on-one is your employee's time. It's up to your employee to structure that time and use that time effectively. And they should come to you with the most important issues that they want to deal with. Like that's a great North Star to have for a one-on-one. I've tried it with all kinds of people. My experience is that it works really well with super experienced personnel. So if you're talking about an SVP with 25 years experience and you say, this is your time, come with the agenda, that's awesome. Works perfectly. If you're talking about managing a 22-year-old first time sales rep right out of college, or maybe they're 23 or 24 and we're an SDR and have graduated to being a rep, and you ask them to do the same sort of thing as a frontline manager, I mean, you're just asking them to do a thing that they don't know how to do. And so for more junior employees, I totally agree with you. For more junior employees, you need to add more of that structure so that they can learn how to structure themselves over time. With more senior employees, you can get away with having them bring the agenda. But the challenge with the more senior employees is that, for me anyway, I've got to do more reflective after the one-on-one. So more senior employees going to come to me with harder problems that just have more nuance to them that I'm not going to be able to necessarily think through on the fly in the one-on-one. And so I walk away with those meetings tending to have more homework. And so you get that kind of mix.
Yeah, I really couldn't agree with you more here, Rob, as I fit into that second description you were talking about, being 24. I think that when I'm in these one-on-one meetings, it's very easy for me to go through all the tactical things, right? And understand and walk through my to-do list and really break down what I need to do, what I'm prioritizing. What I think is important from the manager's perspective is like getting more strategic, right? Zooming out and introducing sometimes those career path conversations, right? It's like, okay, it's been 9 months. Are you even thinking about this? Because sometimes you don't, right? Sometimes you just don't have time to. And maybe just introducing that structure can go a long way and make them feel like there's a dual investment in that growth. And, just to double down on something that you touched on earlier, you were talking about organizational design and how you're thinking through that. As you look at your entire marketing department right now, what functions are you, really devoting the most resources in, or are you zeroing in on right now, and why?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Changes over time. So we had, I would describe it as a underperforming product marketing organization because we didn't have a product marketing organization. So the way that at our scale of company, and just to give context, 450 people, we're going to be IPO scale this year, growing 50% plus year over year. I mean, it's a good sized business, right? And when I look at an underperforming function in marketing at this scale, my number one focus is finding a leader to run the function. And so for product marketing, decide, product marketing is underperforming, bring a bunch of people together that are doing product marketing like things around Salsify. I spend some time managing the function and some time managing the people, but really I'm spending most of my time sourcing a leader. And, this goes to what's the focus times used for. When I was doing that, I was spending time looking at LinkedIn profiles of people that have been very successful at B2B SaaS product marketing, getting a sense of their profiles, building what my interview strategy is going to be, and so on and so forth. And so we've hired him. His name is VJ. He's out of London. He's senior vice president. And now he runs the function, right? And so now my time is helping him ramp as effectively as possible and making sure that he's matrixed into all the right parts of the organization that he needs to be matrixed into, and then understanding budget requirements for the way that he's seeing the development of the team and the programs that he has to build. And we're at a scale now where for me, I look at an area of development and it's all about find the leader, develop the leader, which is not how it always has been. If I go back 3-4 years, a lot of the function required much more hands-on tactical day-to-day management.
So real quick here, because you said something interesting when you said that product marketing was underperforming. I find product marketing to be a super, it just really varies what that function's job is, depending on the company, depending on what the product does, and what the company really needs in that moment. It's a Swiss Army knife function, and so I'm curious to hear more about how you identified that it was underperforming and what metrics you care about as it relates to product marketing.
Yeah, product marketing when it's not working is a death by 1,000 cuts. It's not any one thing, and so I'll give you some examples. I think we were leaving money on the table all over the place because our pricing strategy wasn't as good as it could be, right? And so for example, we raised 155 million Series E back in September. Warburg Pincus led the round. They did diligence on Salsify by hiring a management strategy consulting leader to interview CPG companies about players that were in our space. And so they interviewed 150 or something like that companies that we and our competitors work with that are all, $1 billion plus manufacturers. And one of the things that came back is interview after interview had the customer saying, God, this Salsify thing is so great. I can't believe how cheap it is, And it's like a knife in your side every single time.
Yeah, talk about a backhanded compliment.
And so you hear that, right? So that's one type of evidence. Another type of evidence is when in Slack you start seeing sales reps asking a lot of questions about you versus competition all over the place. So there's no centralized or up-to-date or maintained effective competitive battle cards against your key competitors. You're maybe lacking reporting against your competitors and lacking, clear, specific differentiation that they can repeat. Another one is you go to the website and you look at a product page on the website. And as a founder, I know I can look at the product page and I can read through it and I can think, man, we're not really saying that much here. You go through things like this. So there's a lot of those types of effects. And then another one which is huge for us is our product managers I love our product management organization. They're amazing. They were really working their butts off. I mean, they were spread pretty thin. And if you analyze the time that they were, what they were spending their time on, a lot of it was product marketing things, right? Like a product is being launched. What is the preparation that you have to have for the launch? You're going to have a webinar for the customer base talking about a new product feature. Who's going to write the content for the webinar? How do you position it to the customer base? What are the customer bases are going to care most about the new feature? Like these are all things that take time that typically a product marketing organization would do. And we had people that weren't just product managers that were doing these things, but in broad strokes, none of the process was really centrally run. A lot of it was ad hoc and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think product marketing is a key organization for a product company, and we got pretty far for not having had one.
Hey, Andrei from Troops here. Are you using Slack or Microsoft Teams at your organization? If you are, then you have to be delivering the right information to the right people at the right time from your CRM, marketing automation, support, sales engagement, and customer success systems in an actionable way with Troops.ai. But don't just take my word for it. Listen to what our customers are saying about their experience using Troops.
You can start to really optimize your sales team. And I feel like that's where sales team need to, if you want to scale up sales team effectively, you need to understand every lever and every process for it to be efficient. Otherwise, you can throw 100 sales reps and you can still have money, but it would not be effective and it's not going to stand the test of time till we build that out. So that really allows us to kind of get in the right direction.
Andreessen Horowitz had a podcast on, this is a couple years ago, I remember listening.
Totally listened to this. I know exactly what you're talking about.
It was like on category design, category creation was the title of the podcast. And the whole podcast was how product marketing is the most important function in any product company. And I remember kind of chuckling a little bit at it, thinking like, oh man, they're totally right. But also, we're doing okay. You know what I mean? Like you can sort of just justify not investing heavily in a thing if it doesn't seem to be hurting you until it does.
Like the whole reason this podcast exists is because people are the highest leverage point of any organized effort, including a business. That's why it's called Business is Human. And I've just have seen firsthand how organizations can transform with just one person being put at the leadership helm of it. You don't really know what good looks like until you have it. You don't realize how much you might be missing the ball until you have somebody who's knocking it out of the park. These people out at places like Andreessen, et cetera, they're saying this for a reason. And sometimes it's really hard to discern where you are and benchmark against that at any given time.
I agree with that, but there's also something that's tough about building something new which is that everyone has 1,000 pieces of advice, and almost the most important thing is what to ignore, or else like how do you selectively pick the one or two things you're gonna follow through on. So it's tough. You hear 100 things that you're not doing, and which, if any, are you going to actually put time and energy into? I will say though, in the spirit of humanizing business, one thing that's been really interesting is to watch the evolution of the culture when new leaders come in, because leaders have an outsized impact on the culture of the business and the evolution of it. And we hired a guy named Mike Milburn as our president, and Mike was the chief customer officer of Salesforce. And Mike's background, it comes out of services. I mean, he was the GM of Service Cloud at Salesforce. And he came in and he started doing this thing, which I think the spirit of this podcast would really appreciate, which is he started thanking people. And it sounds like a small thing, but for whatever reason, our company was not like a thanking company. It was a get shit done company. It's like let's sit down and let's get to business. You sit down. All right, I've got a product roadmap to show you. Here's the product roadmap. And then, like, my style at least is pretty aggressive. So it's like Socratically interrogating the product roadmap, and then the meeting is over. And that's kind of how the business was run. And I love it. And I think a lot of people appreciate sort of the pragmatic aspect of it. One thing that I think I really underappreciated in retrospect is how impactful being thoughtful about saying thank you and acknowledging people's hard work and things like that, is on a regular basis. So Mike, I think almost the two most common words out of his mouth are thank you. And he's got other people saying it now too. And I could see it just kind of permeating through the company. And it's nice. It lightens things up. It makes people feel good. And I think it's been a very positive change. It's one of those small things that, I don't based on who I am and my background and the way I like to work and things like that. I wouldn't have expected it to matter that much, and it's mattered a lot. So that's a tip that I would just give people in general culturally is be a thank you culture. It's not something I've seen anyone write about, and I love it.
That's awesome. We actually start our all hands meeting off on Mondays with just thank yous. And so everybody types their name into the chat and then they just say, hey, thanks so-and-so for XYZ. I think it's really, really great. And I hear you, man. I mean, I'm the same way where it's like, I just have always had such high expectations of myself where I don't need anybody to pat me on the back.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I don't need people to tell me I'm good. Like I'm always telling myself I suck and like I could do better and like all these things. And like, of course I got it done. Like that's what I'm here to do. And you got to realize as a leader and just generally as a human, like not everybody's like that. Not everybody's wired like you. Sometimes you need those words of affirmation to feel good about things. And so that definitely resonates deeply. Rob, I feel like you got a lot of hot takes on things, which I think is awesome. And one of the if I had to like thematically sum up some of the things we're talking about, whether it's blocking your time or hiring amazing people, it's this concept of control. And I know one thing that I've seen you write about is a circle of control versus circle of concern. And I think it's actually a pretty fascinating topic for us all to understand. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I first heard this concept from a blogger named Mr. Money Mustache, who's kind of I just want to say that because it's such a hilarious tag, right? Mr. Money Mustache. He's the leading blogger in the FIRE community, the Financial Independent Retire Early community. His blog is there's a lot to like in the blog about a point of view on financial agency and independence that I would recommend. Anyway, so he got the concept from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is one of these old timey books that is still relevant but doesn't have the popularity that other books have these days. It's kind of like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a great book. It's still timely. There's a lot in there that you can learn from.
Totally.
But it was published so long ago that it doesn't have the same popularity. So in the 7 Habits, they talk about the circle of control, which is the set of things in your life that you can impact and change and affect, etc. And then there's the circle of concern, which is all the things in the world that might possibly occupy your brain space. And the argument that the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People makes is that to the extent that your circle of concern is the same as your circle of control, that actually increases your ability to make change in the world. And by making those things the same, and by really investing in the things that you can impact and the things that you can control, actually your circle of control will grow over time. So in the long run, you'll be really a lot more impactful if you focus on the things you can control. And in this day and age, I mean, people have written about it as the age of anxiety, and in COVID, people are talking about doom scrolling and whatever. There's an infinity number of news sources out there that could make you angry or make you anxious or make you thinking about stuff that really has nothing to do with you in your day-to-day life. And you can be inundated by this stuff. And you can spend an infinite amount of time reading about, whatever topic there is out there that boils your blood. And the reality is your actions aren't going to change really 99.9% of the time based on those things that you read. And, but you're going to be distracted. You're going to be stressed. You're going to be unhappy in various levels. And you're reading about things that you can't control, as opposed to reading about something that could help you maybe upskill in your job or, teach you a new skill or anything like that. And so I'm a huge believer in the importance of spending your time, your mental focus, your emotional energy on the things that are within your life, within your circle of control, and just ignore the other things. And you know what? Like the world's going to be fine if you don't read the news. And so for me, it's like I don't watch sports. I don't read the news. The only news that I read is I'm in retail. I'm in e-commerce. So I read a lot of retail and e-commerce news because it helps me become more expert in the space that, that I'm trying to have an impact on. Like things around those topics. Or I read a lot of nonfiction. You mentioned Deep Work earlier by Cal Newport. I read a lot of Cal Newport. I read his blog. I listen to his podcast. And so I try to invest my time and my energy and my brain in things that are right around like my locus of control, my ability to impact the world. And I try to ignore as much of the rest of it as possible. And so I can't recommend that highly enough, man. I think it's a great way to be effective in this world.
You're so preaching to the choir right now. I feel like I have gotten shit from my friends for years because I don't watch the news at all. And they're like, wow, you're so misinformed. You're so ignorant. I'm honestly, it's like, I'm not super into politics. And I just feel like, I started to read Trailblazer, Mark Benioff's book. I'm like listening to it kind of passively. And the whole idea is kind of like, how you can change the world through business. And I just feel like we're not all meant to be curing cancer. We're not all meant to be the Pope. We're not all meant to be the president. We're not all meant to be these things. And so, you naturally gravitate towards certain things in your life. That's where you start to invest. And the unique point that you're bringing up here is that all of those other things that seemingly more directly impact something that you care about, if you actually just double down on your lane, you can probably have just as much of an impact on those things, if not more. And I think a lot of people it's not an obvious thing, but it's definitely something that has been, it's part of my belief system too. And I've never heard it summed up in a conceptual thing like circle of control versus circle of concern before.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And just to chime in here, right? It's not something people are used to, right? This is a new skill because the reality has changed so much. It's almost like the meeting problem that you were talking about earlier. You can be a full-time consumer of media content today and get nothing else done because there's so much of it. And you can basically rent out your entire mindshare and your entire life to that content and what's going on around the world because it's available. And that's honestly their goal, right? Like that's what's happening. They want your attention so that they can serve you that ad. They want your attention so that they can influence you in the way that you vote, right? So I hadn't even thought about it until you brought it up, Rob, but that's got to be the most underrated skill I've heard of in a long time, ignoring everything that isn't important or that you can directly control. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it becomes more important when you have kids too. I mean, I've got 2 little kids, and I've got a job that's pretty demanding, and I like to stay fit. I think it's really important to be physically healthy, and I'm also interested in a lot of things in that are just kind of related to my job. Like Cal Newport stuff on deep work. I'm reading a book on how to take effective notes right now, which is something that I've kind of thought about for years, and then I found
what are you reading on that, by the way?
It's called How to Take Smart Notes, and it's about Zytocasting. It's like
Are you a Rome research guy?
I'm an Obsidian guy.
Okay, nice.
Same family though. I mean, it's like
same animal.
But new to the space within the last 6 or 8 weeks, and I'm loving it so far. I tried to use Evernote for years and couldn't really make it sing for me, and thus far I love the Obsidian plus the Zytocasting stuff, but I'm still new. And so like there's I want to spend time on stuff like that, right? I enjoy stuff like that, and I find that it makes me more effective overall. And you start adding these things up, and then I also I've got a wife. I need to spend time with her. I love spending time with her, but also it's like important to have time for the relationship. And, right now we're with my parents in Naples and I spend time with them. And so you start adding up the things that are on that list, and there's not time for other things. Right. So I don't watch Netflix and I don't read news, and Andrei, your point's exactly right. Like the world will take your time if you let it take your time, and you have to fight back to not have the world take your time and instead deploy your time intentionally on the things that matter to you.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is pretty cool about you reading the note-taking stuff is, and I've recognized this with Rome. I did like a whole course on it, on how to use it, because whether it's taking notes or whether it's running a meeting or whether it's, even constructing an email, there are like certain things where you are going to be doing this routine ritual task for years and years and years and years and years and years. Like the kind of the content of that might change, but like the actual, like the process of taking notes, the process of running a meeting, doing a workout, whatever it is. So you might as well get freaking good at it. You know what I mean? You might as well like invest in learning how to improve it. And this to me is a great example. And I can tell you, like, just for me personally, like investing in like some personal development around like upping how I'm organizing my thoughts and documenting them in a way that's searchable and connected and is like a nucleus has been incredible, from just synthesizing ideas and creativity and recall. It's been awesome.
I love the note system so far. The big idea here is you've got limited time and you've got to spend it. You got to spend it well. And fundamentally, the circle of concern is about that. And so it sounds like you're living it. It's a hard thing for people to live because you got to say no to a lot of stuff that other people are into.
Trade-offs, man. It's all about. It's life. Well, that said, let's go over to the lightning round where we'll get some more fun insights on Rob.
All right, Rob. Let's start with this one here. What was the biggest inflection point in your career?
So I started my career at IBM as a software engineer, and I managed to get a job at Endeca Technologies in 2006. Endeca was acquired by Oracle in 2011 for $1.1 billion. Endeca invented search navigation for e-commerce. Jason Purcell, who became eventually my co-founder and is the CEO of Salsify, Jason hired me as a junior product manager at Endeca, and I didn't know what a product manager was. I had really no idea. And I like barely understood what Endeca did. And I met Jason and he gave me a chance. And that job at Endeca got me into e-commerce, got me into more of the business of software rather than the creation of software, and was absolutely the turning point. My whole career is built on just getting lucky on that job.
We keep hearing about the importance of just cultivating those relationships with people that to the point where they feel comfortable taking that chance, that outsized risk on you, so that you can take that big jump. And hop in and take that job that you might not be qualified for. What is one skill that you would like to make sure to pass on to your children, ages 1 and 4?
I don't know the right word to think about this, but I think of it as perspective hacking. Let me give you an example. A lot of people will personalize almost everything that happens in their life, and I think that's a very natural human thing, right? You're the star of the story of your life. And when someone's pissed and they're pissed at you, then you experience it as they're pissed at you. You experience it as it having been about you. And the perspective hack in those situations where somebody is mean to you or treats you like crap or is angry or is rude or is any of those things, the perspective hack is it has nothing to do with you. They're just angry. That's their thing. They're experiencing anger, right? And so that's not your anger, it's their anger. It's like and 99.9% of the time, it's not even about you. It's usually they're angry at some other shit, and you just happen to be in the way of them doing their thing. And so this reminder that, look, it's not about you. It's never about you. It's about the other person and their stuff. That's a perspective hack that I think if more people adopted it, would make the world a happier place. My good friend Lee Feigenbaum, who I worked with at IBM and at Cambridge Semantics and at Salsify, known him a long time, he has this phrase that you always want to, this is another perspective hack, you always want to assume that the other person is operating with good intention. Like I think a lot of the time you see someone's action and you get pissed off and you're like, how could they be stupid or how could they be so inconsiderate? And like a lot of people have a knee-jerk reaction, which is, judgmental in some way. And instead, if you take a deep breath and you say, okay, well, let me assume that they're just working with good intention. What might their motivation be if they're starting from a place of good intent? And that also is diffusing and makes the world a better place. I've already talked about things like the news. I think a good perspective hack there is the news is important. What if it's not? What if you reading the news doesn't matter at all? Right?
Amen.
And so like I think I've got this ability, and I know a few other people who have it too. I mean, Scott, it sounds like you're right in the middle here, where it's like I can convince myself of a truth of the world that's kind of like these things, and it makes me happier. It makes my Tuesdays better. You know what I mean? It makes the world a better place, makes me more effective, and it's sort of like this the underlying belief is that the world is malleable, and the malleability is largely based on my perception, and my perception is in my control. And so that's why it's like the perception hacking is, or the perspective hacking is how I think about it.
I don't remember what the exact term was, but it was in the Steve Jobs book. It was that idea that he could just make the future and force it onto his employees and then force them to do it. Right? It was like that story where he got the first iPod and it was in his hand and he said it has to be smaller, and they said it's not possible, and he just threw it in a water tank and bubbles came up and he goes, yes, it is. And like he just like approached every single situation like that. But for my last question here, Rob, as Scott said, it seems like you have a lot of hot takes. It seems like you make a lot of these yourself and you're a lifelong learner. What is something that you really believed in, a governing life principle that you have actually recently changed your mind about?
Ooh, we talked about the thank you culture. I'll tell you that the way that Scott described it earlier, in terms of I don't need to be thanked for my work. Like it's not something that I've ever needed. I'm kind of hard charging. I like to accomplish things. I'm interested in one way to think about it is I'm interested in things, not people. Like when I get together with people, I don't want to talk about like, how was your weekend? I don't care about your weekend. I really don't. What I want to talk about is the project that we're working on together. That's interesting to me. The book that you read, that's interesting to me. How you feel about something that happened, I don't care. Right. So I'm a thing person, not a person in that way. And so I've really discounted a lot of the person fluffy stuff, the thank yous and the I appreciate it and all that. And honestly, my whole life I've discounted how useful that stuff is for anybody. And yeah, I think I've changed my mind completely about the importance of it in general, especially for managing teams, especially for managing a company and stuff like that. Over the last 6-7 months since Mike's joined. So that for me is a big one. That's a recent mind shift. The other recent mind shift is my dad's Cuban, and we would visit the Cuban family in Miami every summer. And Miami in August is awful. It's like 50,000 degrees. It's just awful. And now my folks are in Naples, Florida, where I'm in. My kids, my wife, we're visiting them in February, and it's like 70 degrees, and it's amazing. And so I spent my whole life hating Florida, and now Florida is pretty nice. I gotta get it now. All right, so those are the two things I'll give you.
It's never too early to snowbird is my new mantra.
Yeah.
So, Rob, man, this has been awesome. I've had so much fun. We're super grateful for you coming on. And look, maybe we bring one of these back in a year or something, and all of our thoughts and ideas will be, vastly more formed. But dude, you're a lifelong learner, and I appreciate your perspective. And we're really excited to watch what happens to Salsify. It sounds like an incredibly exciting time for your business.
Thanks so much, Scott. Andrew, thanks for having me on. This has been great.
And we know you're a marketer, so you're probably out there, in the social world. Are you on Twitter, LinkedIn? How can people follow you and stay connected to your work?
Of the things that I don't do, social media is pretty high on the list. I'm a little active on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest place to find me.
Nice.
And then we've got, if you like e-commerce in particular, there's a podcast, Unpacking the Digital Shelf, in which I'm a co-host. And it's very different than this podcast. It's really just e-commerce for manufacturers. So if you happen to be in that small swim lane, that's a good place to go.
Love it. We'll check it out. Well, thanks everybody. We'll see you on the next show. If you liked the episode, don't forget to leave a review. We appreciate you, and we will see you soon.